call to separation, why the crowd is the enemy of the self. There comes a pivotal moment in the life of every man when the world he once clung to no longer holds, not because the world has changed, but because he has. The voices he once found comfort in, friends, family, teachers, begin to ring hollow. Familiar words lose their meaning. Approval begins to feel like a prison. This moment is not a crisis, it is a calling. Carl Jung named it the path of individuation, the journey of becoming oneself. And it always begins with separation. A man must step away from the crowd, from the noise, from the cultural scripts passed down to him like hand-me-downs that never quite fit. Jung understood that most people are not truly living, they are merely performing. They wear the persona, the psychological mask, crafted to please, to conform, to avoid rejection. They adapt to what society wants, not because it is right, but because it is easy. The average man moves through life as a hostage to opinion, chained not by force, but by a hunger for approval. He fears being seen as different, as intense, as too much. And so, he chooses the comfort of invisibility over the discomfort of authenticity. But the man who is destined to become more than a memory must make a different choice: to walk alone or to vanish within the herd. From childhood, boys are trained to suppress the wildness within. They are told to be polite, to blend in, to soften their voice and their will. Ambition is cautioned against, rebellion is punished, and intensity is labeled as a threat. The result? Men who are praised for their silence, rewarded for their submission, and applauded for their obedience. Teachers love the quiet student. Society loves the agreeable man. Churches glorify the broken and the tame. And men, desperate for belonging, surrender their fire to be accepted. But beneath the conditioned behaviors, beneath the trained responses, there remains something untouched. A raw self, unfiltered, unapologetic, and whole. That self is your birthright, and it cannot be reclaimed through applause. It must be reclaimed through solitude. Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But to claim that privilege, you must pay the price: distance. You cannot become your true self while surrounded by people who benefit from your false one. You must create space, mental, emotional, spiritual, from inherited beliefs, from cultural distractions, from the false idols of fame and recognition. And yes, they will accuse you of arrogance, of selfishness, of being too deep, too intense, too different. Let them. You were never made to belong to them. You were never meant to be fragmented. You were meant to be whole. And wholeness begins precisely where the need to please ends. Look at every enduring myth, every sacred text, every story that has survived the erosion of time. What did the great men do before they became legends? They left. Jesus withdrew into the desert. Muhammad retreated to a cave. Buddha abandoned the palace. Moses wandered through the wilderness. Nietzsche's Zarathustra descended from the mountains after years of solitude. These are not merely religious tales or literary metaphors. They are psychological blueprints. The man who wishes to change the world must first detach himself from it. He must silence the noise and return to the signal. And that signal does not come from the voices of the world. It emerges from clarity within. Yet today, solitude is almost seen as a flaw. A man who walks alone is labeled as unloved, broken, or antisocial. But that is the lie of the collective, crafted to keep you dependent. to keep you seeking approval, to keep you small. True solitude is not loneliness, it is purification. It is the furnace where your voice grows louder than the world's. It is the space where your thoughts sharpen, your instincts return, and your mission begins to reveal itself. In solitude, you begin to remember. You remember the dreams you buried just to be accepted, the strength you hid just to be liked, the brilliance you dimmed to avoid envy. The man who walks alone begins to remove the masks. One by one they fall, and what remains is not emptiness, it is essence. But make no mistake, this separation will not be easy. It will require sacrifice. You will lose relationships. You will be called distant. You will be mocked by the very voices that once praised you, and you must endure it all. Because the pain of isolation is nothing compared to the slow death of imitation. The truth is, most men fear silence. Not because it is empty, but because in silence, they meet the one person they've been running from all along, themselves. A man who can sit in silence, without distraction, without a screen to scroll, without cigarettes, without the need for sex or alcohol, becomes a dangerous man. Not because he is violent, but because he is no longer possessed by anything outside of himself. This is where myth begins. Not with applause, not with recognition, not with crowds shouting your name, but with a quiet refusal to be hypnotized by the collective. It begins with a silent vow to live in truth, even if that truth demands solitude. Carl Jung never promised that the path to becoming oneself would be easy. He only made it clear that it was necessary. Without separation, there can be no self. And without the self, there can be no legacy. So to the man standing at the edge of awakening, unsure whether to retreat or advance, I offer this: trust the silence. Step away from the noise and do not fear the distance it creates. A man who walks alone may be misunderstood for a time, but in the end, he becomes more than understood. He becomes legend, a force, a sovereign soul, a myth embodied. Yet, once a man has walked away from the crowd, he finds himself entering a darker and far more dangerous passage, the confrontation with his own soul. This is where most men turns back, because here the real war begins, not against the world, but against the self. Jung warned that individuation is not a path of light, but a descent into darkness. It demands that we face the parts of ourselves we have buried, denied, or feared for years. The man who chooses to walk alone must not only leave others behind, he must face the beast within. And the beast does not go quietly. This stage cannot be fabricated, cannot be staged for social media, and cannot be reduced to a motivational quote. It is not pretty, it is brutal, it is spiritual surgery. The man who was once praised for being charming, polite, respectable, he must now look into the mirror and confront everything he tried to conceal. His cowardice, his lust, his resentment, his envy, his addictions, his irrational fears, the pain he never admitted, the weaknesses he blamed on others, and the darkness that quietly simmers beneath the surface of every man, no matter how composed he appears. Jung called this confrontation with the shadow the core of becoming whole, because until a man has faced what is unworthy within him, he is not alive. He is only performing. Imagine your soul as a long-abandoned house. From the outside, it may appear clean, organized, even beautiful, but beneath the floorboards, rot has spread. Most people live their entire lives decorating the living room, pretending the basement doesn't exist. But the man on the path of individuation descends into that basement alone. without a flashlight, because he knows that is where the truth lives. And it is within that darkness that he begins to integrate. What if everything you've been chasing has been making you weaker? What if pleasure is not the reward, but the trap? What if desire itself has always been the enemy? The death of desire is the path of the Stoic, toward clarity, toward cold light. This is not self-help. This is not personal development. This is war. It is the killing of unnecessary need, the conquest of the mind. It is through this descent that the man realizes the darkness is not only a chamber of shame, it is a vault of unused power. The anger that once made him reckless can be forged into purpose. The lust that once ruled him can be transformed into ambition. The fear that once paralyzed him can become focus, but only if he is willing to sit with it, to wrestle it, to absorb it into himself. Every man who has risen above mediocrity has passed through this descent. It is the dark night of the soul that the mystics wrote about. It is the depression that has no name, the spiritual void that success cannot fill. The silent urge to destroy everything, just to see what's real. It is not madness, it is initiation. Jung himself walked through this fire. He spent years in psychological anguish, recording visions and terrors in what became the Red Book, his private map through chaos and meaning. He did not dismiss this madness, he honored it, because he understood that only the man who confronts the worst within himself can ever be truly free. The modern world does not teach men how to confront their darkness. It teaches them how to run. It trains them to numb themselves with pleasure, to anesthetize their inner unrest with noise, pornography, alcohol, casual sex, social media, video games. Stay busy, stay distracted, stay shallow. Because if you ever stop, if you ever sit in silence long enough, you might begin to hear the echoes of everything you've been avoiding. But the man who finds the strength to stop running becomes something different. His eyes change, his energy shifts. People sense something in him they cannot explain. Why? Because he has faced dragons in his mind that others have not even named. Yet this stage is not about perfection. It is not about becoming a saint. It is about becoming whole. Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Wholeness means no longer fearing your own chaos, no longer projecting your insecurities onto others, no longer blaming the world for wounds you refuse to heal. Instead, you begin to transmute them. The man who walks this path begins to emanate a quiet power, not because he is above others, but because he is no longer at war with himself. The descent is sacred. It strips away illusion. It burns away arrogance. It humbles you, then rebuilds you. You do not emerge as a perfect man, but as a real one. And in a world addicted to performance and artifice, that is power. So when you feel like you are breaking, unraveling, doubting everything, do not panic. That is the path. That is the rite of passage. Let the false self die. Let the proud self burn. Because on the other side of that inner fire, a sovereign man waits to be born. After solitude, after the descent into darkness, something strange begins to happen. One morning, you wake up and the world feels different. Not because the world has changed, but because you have. You no longer crave attention. You no longer chase validation. You feel no compulsion to impress, to prove, or to please. There is a silence within you now, calm, grounded, unshakable. This is the rise of the sovereign self. The man who has walked alone, who has wrestled with his own darkness and emerged on the other side, is no longer driven by fear or ego. He does not seek to control others because he has mastered himself, and in that mastery, he becomes magnetic. This is the paradox of power. Those who chase it rarely hold it, but the man who becomes it, by aligning with the deepest core of who he is, possesses it without ever needing to announce it. Carl Jung taught that the goal of individuation is not perfection, but wholeness. That means the man who has integrated his shadow does not deny his darker impulses. He contains them. He directs them. He channels the chaos of the unconscious into concentrated force. There is a fire in his eyes, but it is not wild or erratic. It is a slow, steady flame, controlled and deliberate. It belongs to a man who knows who he is and where he is going. While others are scattered by opinions, trends, and trivial pursuits, he remains fixed on purpose. And that purpose is not handed down by the world. It is born from within. You will notice that the sovereign man does not speak much. He does not overshare. He does not explain himself. He doesn't need to. He has nothing to prove. He acts with what Jung called inner authority. His compass lies within, not without. While others wait for permission to act, he grants it to himself. While others rely on applause to feel worthy, he moves quietly, detached from outcomes. This detachment is not indifference. It is spiritual clarity. He does not seek respect from others because he has earned it from himself. People begin to notice something in this man, not in loud ways, but in quiet impressions. They wonder how he does it, how he remains calm under pressure, how he speaks little, yet commands much. They can't define it, but what they sense is harmony. Most men are fragmented, ruled by desire, anger, fear, or ambition. But the man who has walked the entire path, who has separated from the crowd, descended into his darkness, and risen whole, radiates harmony. And harmony is rare. It threatens the weak, and it becomes a beacon to those still searching for strength. And here is the truth. The man who walks alone is not condemned to loneliness. The paradox of this path is that when you no longer need anyone, the right ones begin to appear. Not because you chase them, but because they are drawn to your signal. Women feel it. Children sense it. Even your enemies will feel it. You become a mirror. You force others to see what they are not. And many will hate you for that. But some will follow. Some will rise. Some will remember who they are simply by standing near you. But this presence is not born overnight. It is forged in fire, in silence, in pain, in years of unseen labor. You did not become sovereign by chance. You became sovereign by choosing the hard path again and again. You walked away when staying would have been easier. You descended when escape was tempting. You told the truth to yourself when the world around you was addicted to lies. And now, you walk the earth differently. You are not a follower. You are not a seeker. You are not a slave to impulse. You are a king without a crown, a weapon without a war, a legend because you became one in silence. And so the man who walks alone becomes more than a man. He becomes a force, a presence, a symbol of what becomes possible when a soul stops running from itself. The world may never understand you, but it will never forget you, because the man who has faced himself can face anything. Remember this, it is not noise that shapes destiny. It is the quiet, disciplined will of the one who dares to stand alone. In a time when most men are chasing comfort, your solitude is a rebellion. In an age that worships performance, your silence is power. And in a world of borrowed identities, the man who knows who he is becomes unforgettable.